Hello, and today we have another great video for you here on Code with Lily Code. So I've came up with this great concept, the coding alphabet, and I'm going to go from A to Z, and as I go from A to Z, I'm going to call out each letter in the alphabet and speak about an aspect of coding, such as it could be a theory, coding technologies, languages, certain aspects of coding, important points to note when coding. So I'm going to come up with a letter for each word of the alphabet and give you an example with something got to do with coding for each letter. So let's get started. Today we're going to start with the letters A, B and C. The first letter, A, is analytical. Why have I chosen the word analytical as my first letter from my coding alphabet? The reason is, this is one skill that you are going to have to learn if you want to get into coding. It took me a long time to realise that being analytical is an absolute must in the coding industry. You have to get your brain into an analytical way of thinking right through the whole process. Let me explain. It starts right at the beginning of the process. When you first get your issue or you have a problem to solve, first of all you need to break down this issue and look at it, analyse it and try and figure out exactly what it is that's required of you to fix this issue. Once you've broken down the problem, you can then look at the solution. You want to come up with a few different ways of solving the problem if you can, or just one to begin with. But you also want to plan your answer. A good way of planning how you're going to respond or code your response to the problem is to write comments. So in the comments you can have perhaps the steps that you're going to take in order to solve a particular problem. So for example, if you're trying to render something that you have perhaps in a TS file, if it was an Angular project, something you have in a TS file and you want to render it in your HTML perhaps with a for loop, first of all you might write a little step-by-step procedure in your TS file in order to tell you what steps you're going to take to complete this task. The first thing you might need to do is create a variable or an array to store the values that are going to be displayed on the HTML page. So you could define a constant or a variable or an array at the top of your HTML file. So you could have a comment. First of all, you need to declare the object or array that you're going to use to store the information coming in. Step 2 could be your function to capture the data and store it in this object. Step 3, go back to your TS file, perform a loop and display the data. So by having a step-by-step instruction wrote somewhere in your comments, it can be very helpful. Be analytical, be logical, try to think through your problem and solution in order to save you time coding. It's a big skill I really learned. It took me a long time to get my head around. Before I was just grabbing and chopping and changing code, which is okay. You do need to go through that learning period. But as soon as you can, really start thinking about why it is you're doing things and what it is that you're doing, because you'll just get so much better, so much quicker. So that's my letter A, analytical. So I hear you ask, what is the letter B? The letter B I have chosen for the coding alphabet is B, body, representing the body tag. The body tag is a tag used in HTML in order to mark the content that is visible on the web page. All the content sits within the body tags and there's an opening and a closing HTML body tag. All of your content will sit within this body tag. So that's the letter B. So the coding alphabet letter C stands for CSS, or Cascading Style Sheets. Cascading Style Sheets are used to style your application. It separates the logic and the functionality from the visual appearance of the site, which is very good for accessibility, such as A11Y, accessibility issues. So this separation of concerns is a good practice to keep your styling separate from the logic. By hooking into different style sheets, you can practically change the look and feel of a website entirely. Your CSS is where all of your different styles will be described and how you're going to style different aspects of your website. Normally, for example, in HTML or in Angular, you would have, let's say for example, a div tag with the class, for example, my class, or main body, container, whatever the class name is. So it's class equal to, and then in quotes, your class name. Then in your CSS file, in order to access this class and add styling to the class, you do a dot and the class name, and then you can access that class. So you might want to give it a font color, a font style. You might want to make it larger. You can do this with pixels or EM. These are different units used when sizing different things in CSS. So there's a whole big world there to get into, but I can recommend some good resources, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So let's go. Some great resources I can recommend, first of all, is CSS Tricks. CSS Tricks is brilliant. It's an online resource where there are many CSS articles, topics of discussion, and you can read up on different aspects of CSS and get some really good hints. So CSS Tricks is a fantastic website. Next on the list is the Mozilla tutorials. There is some really great content on Mozilla. You can get a lot of information on not just CSS but many other programming languages. But for the contents of this particular video, we will focus on the CSS. So you can go onto the Mozilla website and you can really get some great resources there. So I highly recommend this website also. Third is Leah Veru. Leah Veru is an online blogger and she writes various blogs on all things web related, and she is fantastic. So I would check out her website. I'm going to leave links to all of these below, so check them out. Next we have Smashing Magazine. Smashing Magazine again does brilliant blog posts, articles, and they really break down so many different topics for you, and I'm sure you'll find so many things of interest, so do go and check that out. And my last recommendation for you is CodePen, which is like an online sandbox code editor where you can plug and play and just use this online playground to write your HTML, CSS and your JavaScript and just see what will happen without having to compile anything, without having to go anywhere, without having to spin anything up. You can do it all in your browser and just see how perhaps some HTML and CSS might look, or some HTML, CSS and some JavaScript. So it's really useful. You can save these code pens. You can link them in your blogs, or if you create a little portfolio for yourself. I have these linked myself on my portfolio page on my own website. So that's just a tip for you, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for D, E and F. You know we're going all the way through the alphabet. We're going from A to Z. So stay tuned for that, and thank you so much for joining me. All the best. Wish you well, guys. Thank you.